Welcome to the Ketogenic Diet Show. My name is Mary Beauchamp, and I'll be your hostess. Let's begin by taking a deep breath together. Take a moment to bring your awareness system into your body and into the present moment. Listen deeply to what your body has to say, because your body has all of the answers, and it's your job to tune in and listen. Your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, and your actions are all instructing your immune system. In this podcast, I'll be exploring the history of human evolution, cultural anthropology, food systems, and the scientific literature, looking at patterns that can give us great insight into how we can live our lives today in a more aligned, integrated, and sustainable way. Here, I attempt to bridge the gap between the science and spirituality of self-healing. This is a process that requires deep self-reflection, which can lead to self-empowerment. My mission is to help as many people as I can to connect with their inner guidance system so that they can make truly informed decisions about their health. And in that process, they can awaken their body's innate intelligence to heal and thrive. When your mind and body are aligned, you are the boss of your emotional and physical health. Taking control of your health is a spiritual journey that requires you to look at what you eat as well as what is eating you. And when you do this, you can take the prescription pen out of your doctor's hand and write your own ticket to wellness. So now that you're fully present in your body, sit back, relax, and enjoy this information. See how it speaks to your body. Feel in and see how your body receives it. When the truth reveals itself to you, it will resonate in your body and you will know it. Then you can act accordingly based on the information you receive. It is totally possible to give your body messages that will consciously relay information to your biochemistry that can support your health and happiness. I'm excited to introduce to you a very special guest today, Travis Moore. Travis currently resides in Dallas, Georgia, just west of Atlanta. He's a former college baseball player turned personal trainer. Travis was an overall healthy individual until around 2016 when he began to experience severe gastrointestinal distress, and he wasn't sure what was causing it. The constant trips to the restroom were causing him to miss practice and even class. Finally, he went to speak with a gastroenterologist who diagnosed him with ulcerative colitis. His doctor then suggested that they would become best friends, and that did not sit well with Travis. This ultimately led to a health journey that would take Travis down many rabbit holes. He was determined to beat this disease without prescription drugs. He tried different diets, breathing exercises, supplements, and even ice baths. Nothing would seem to take the symptoms away until he came across the Carnivore Diet. He's now living a healthy life and working hard towards his next bodybuilding show. I particularly love hearing Travis tell his story about how he was so clearly disturbed by the diagnosis that his doctor had given him, and especially the news that he and his doctor would become best friends, and how that didn't sit well with him. He immediately knew that he did not have a good feeling about that. The medical path that he was given to go down was not sitting well with him, and he knew it in his gut. And that is the very thing that inspired him and motivated him to begin looking and seeking answers and alternatives. That's really the point that I want to bring home to you, is that we have to tune in and listen to our bodies. So before we get started, I just have to let you know that none of this information that we will be talking about here today should be taken as medical advice. You should not change your diet at all until you seek medical advice from a trained healthcare professional. So let's hear from Travis and explore his journey. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Ketogenic Diet Show, Travis.
Yeah, so I am a certified strength and conditioning coach, and I personal train people both in person and online. And that really stemmed from struggles that I experienced for myself. Those struggles didn't really happen until I was a junior in college. And up until that point, I was very athletic, always played sports growing up through elementary, all the way through high school. And once again, I played college baseball. So athletics were a huge part of my life up until that point. And I was always kind of seen as the health guy. Like, I always took a lot of, I was invested a lot into my health and my performance and all these different things, and made sure I was doing the extra training outside of what was required. And so I got to see the fruits of that labor play out on the baseball field. And so I got a college scholarship to go play, and was actually injured my first year. Once I got to the school that I was going to finish out my baseball career, I actually had an injury that first year and ended up getting Tommy John surgery, which is a really common surgery in the baseball community, especially for pitchers. And during that time, I had to miss 2 years of baseball. And so during that time, I was just going to school. I was doing the workouts that I could do. Of course, throwing and pitching and competing and all that stuff was off the table at the time. But it was a blessing in disguise, because during that time, I got to take over a team who was at the college that, although wasn't considered the varsity team, it was more of a developmental team for kids that wanted to play for the college but weren't quite there yet with the tools and resources that they needed to perform on the field. And so I began to start coaching kids in the weight room, and it was a great experience, because these kids were only a few years younger than me at the time, but I kind of had the knowledge and stuff already on how to help with performance on the field and strength in the weight room and all these different things. And so I got to kind of head that and help coach the junior varsity team at my college. And as I mentioned, it was kind of a developmental team. And that's kind of where my love for coaching in the weight room, especially, really took off. And shortly after that, I started to have my own troubles, and I wasn't sure what they were at first. I started to heal from the surgery and started to get back on the baseball field and getting to pitch again. And that was all fine and well. But out of nowhere, it just seemed like I was starting to get these stomach problems, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And it kind of just started off as like an upset stomach. And I thought maybe I had just eaten something. And then I was having a lot of cramping and gas and just all kinds of these problems with my gastrointestinal system. It just was not operating how it should. And I didn't know for the longest time. It was going on for several weeks. And I thought, well, maybe this is just a thing I'm going through. And so I started to question, what's kind of going on here. And I would really have to use the bathroom. So I'd go to the bathroom, but then I couldn't go when I got there. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm dealing with some constipation issues, which I've never had any issues with before. But for some reason at the time, I just thought maybe that's what this is. And continued to have more issues. And so I did probably the worst thing I could have done at that time, was go to the store and get, the magnesium bottles, the glass bottles that you use to use the restroom. And I remember following the directions on it, taking it, and I remember sitting in the restroom, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to feel better after this. And I got cramps and unreal cramps, and there was no relief because my body didn't need to use the restroom. It was just in an inflamed state, and I didn't know it at the time. And so I was pouring gas on a fire that I didn't know I really had brewing. And finally, I talked to my parents. I was away at college, and so I picked up the phone and called my mom and kind of explained to her what was going on. And we saw a gastroenterologist. And of course, after a colonoscopy, he was able to diagnose that I was dealing with ulcerative colitis. And that's kind of where the whole story, that's kind of where the whole story started. So,
Wow. And so how soon, I'm just curious, how soon after your surgery did you start experiencing these intestinal issues? Because I know that it's really, really common for somebody to have a treatment or a surgery or any kind of infection, and they're treated with antibiotics, which of course they probably gave you antibiotics after you had your surgery to prevent infection. And oftentimes that can really just exacerbate or catapult somebody into a ulcerative colitis situation, or you know, um, some type of intestinal distress. So how soon after you had their surgery did you start experiencing those gastrointestinal symptoms?
I would say it was probably over a year after I had my surgery, because it was Tommy John recovery for full recovery is at least a year.
Mhm.
And so it took me quite some time to just rehab through everything. But the gastro stuff really started to happen, I would say, just after a year or maybe more after my surgery. And looking back now, I would probably agree that played a huge part. I think any major trauma to the body or antibiotics in conjunction with that can certainly set somebody off into an autoimmune response. So,
Right. I mean, antibiotics are great because they do kill bacteria, but they also destroy the gut. So the gut bacteria, the healthy gut bacteria. So it's a really
yeah.
common pattern to see. I'm curious to know if your doctor prescribed any dietary changes for one thing, and then what did they suggest, and how did that land in you with what you took away from that?
Well, to start, my gastroenterologist and I did not, in our appointments, we were cordial because, that's just the doctor patient relationship. But I remember vividly one thing and I can remember sitting in the room to this day. He walked in with my colonoscopy results and said, here's your results. We've looked them over. You have ulcerative colitis. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. And he said, you and me are going to be best friends. And I had a terrible feeling in my gut and was like, if you think that I'm going to be best friends with my doctor, you don't know who I am. And so I got like 30 different pages worth of information that day from him that I'm sure they hand out to all of their IBD patients. And I looked through them when I got home. I looked at my colonoscopy images, saw what he was talking about with the inflammation and the ulcers. And the diet portion of it that he recommended was a low FODMAP diet. It was cutting out certain things that are high in fiber and really just trying to stick to a low residue diet. And it was followed with prescription drugs as well. I was placed on mesalamine for prescriptions. And I remember the pills were like huge, and I was taking like 3 of them at a day. And I started to finally look into some other diets and stuff like that. And we can go into more of that later if you'd like. But initially, he started me off on the low FODMAP and prescription drugs. And I did see results after a few months. But looking back, I have to attribute that to the pharmaceuticals. I can't say that it was from the diet alone.
Hmm. And so your symptoms improved, but they obviously didn't go away completely. So what kind of changes did you see? And was it enough? It obviously wasn't enough to stop you from continuing to investigate other alternatives. So,
Yeah, I did have symptom remission for, I would say, several months, less than a year, probably 6 or 7 months. And afterwards, I started to go back into a flare. And so this is when it really started to spark inside of me that, you know, I do not want to go down this pharmaceutical rabbit hole. I don't want to go from one prescription to the next, and then try biologics and all these different things and just hope that they'll work. And if they don't, you get surgery, you get your colon removed, and you get to have a bag attached to your stomach. And the one thing I did not want to go through, because we love taking trips to the beach and all these kinds of things. And I personally would have probably struggled with some self image things and self confidence things that, going to places like that. So I started to look into some different alternatives. And unfortunately, the first thing I came across were some people that were promoting a vegan diet. And so that was the first real attempt that I tried at healing myself. And I was still taking my pharmaceuticals at the time. I was not having symptoms during this time when I transitioned to the vegan diet. I weaned off my prescription drugs and was doing fine for a while and thought I had this thing tackled and was like, I got this thing figured out. Vegan diet has fixed me. I'm going to keep moving. And really what I think it was I still had some of the drugs in my body that were keeping this stuff at bay and preventing the immune attacks. But really, I went into another flare not too long after that, and was right back to the drawing board again. So I transitioned into other diets after that. I tried to go gluten free. I cut out all of the grains, so I was sticking really with like white rice and gluten free breads and pastas and different things. And once again, I had a little bit of success for a little while, and then I would have a few months of success, and then I'd go back into a flare and I'd have to try again. And another diet I had tried after that was the specific carbohydrate diet, which also had success for quite some time on that. And during that time, I was also seeing a naturopathic doctor to try to figure out what I could take that wasn't pharmaceutical, but it was still, natural and not going to necessarily hurt my body. and had success with that for several months. And then I went into a flare again. And the last flare that I had was roughly a year long. So in an entire year, I was in a flare. Pretty much, I can't say it was even on and off. There was always some sort of adverse effect that I was dealing with, whether it was gas and bloating or blood and mucus. And for those of the people that don't know what ulcerative colitis is, it's inflammation of the colon specifically. It's under the umbrella of irritable bowel disease with Crohn's, and it's just Crohn's, and it affects different parts of the digestive tract, whereas ulcerative colitis is the colon in and of itself. So I was dealing with blood and mucus, and just it's a very vulgar image, I guess you could say, and it's hard to think about. But it's for people who have struggled with it. That's what they deal with day in and day out. And so after that full year of working through that stuff, you can imagine from a mental and physical standpoint, I was not in a great place.
Yeah. For people that are struggling with this sort of thing, the prognosis is not great, right? So they offered you, if this doesn't go away, you may have to have surgery and have your colon removed. You have to be on antibiotics or other pharmaceuticals to reduce inflammation and things like that, prevent the diarrhea, prevent the gas, prevent the bleeding, all of that stuff. So it requires a lot of medication, a lot of management, and oftentimes these are considered uncurable things. These are things that the medical establishment has no treatment for other than pharmaceuticals and surgery, which is truly the case for many of these chronic illnesses that we see so much of today. This is something that's kind of being revived, and it could be, the paleo diet or the carnivore diet, but paleo is a little bit different because that includes some other plants that many people cannot handle. I also had my own journey with the carnivore diet, and having to do with inflammation and joint pain and a lot of other symptoms as well. The keto diet also can include a lot of plants, right? It can be very plant heavy. The interesting thing is seeing these people like yourself, Travis, who have come through such turmoil and really come out the other side. And, there's also a place in Budapest, Hungary, called the International Center for Medical Nutrition, and they're very successful treating and curing Crohn's and IBD and all these other things that are, again, thought of as being incurable, and that there's just nothing you can do but take these medicines and get surgery. And so there's more and more of a growing population and awareness about these alternatives. And so it's really exciting for you to share your story, because I know so many people are out there struggling with their digestion. I appreciate you bringing up the doctors' names that you did, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Baker, Dr. Sophia Clemens. There's just, the list goes on and on and on with researchers and scientists and doctors who are digging in and finding out that, wow, this information exists and it's in the scientific literature, and it's just not being presented. And I guess that's the part that really, more than anything, as a nurse myself, is so frustrating. And that is why I want people like you to keep telling their stories and to keep putting this out there, because we're not being educated and we're not being given the opportunity to have truly informed consent about what we choose to do about our health. And so, like you're outlining so beautifully, it is up to us to take control of our health. Nobody's going to do this for us. You can go down these rabbit holes and try these different diets, and it takes a lot of time. And what you're sharing could save somebody a lifetime of struggle and a lot of time trying to figure this out. And it does sound crazy. I do admit, for me as well, it was very hard to wrap my head around doing a low carb diet and not having vegetables. I just couldn't accept it for the longest time. And I finally decided I was willing to do anything to, one, get off supplements, and two, resolve my inflammatory symptoms as well, where I just had immediate relief. And now I know that when I go back and I have a bite of this or that, or a little bit of dark chocolate once in a while, or maybe some black tea, which I used to drink every day and eat chocolate every day on a keto diet, I immediately feel terrible. And it's such a direct correlation that there's no denying it for me anymore. And so, yeah, I just really appreciate you illuminating that. What is it that you might recommend to people who are trying to up-level their health or optimize their health and also their nutrition, stamina? Because I know that you're an athlete and a personal trainer. If I were trying to up my game or gain muscle mass or whatever, what types of things might you suggest for people?
Yeah. So first and foremost, just to address the doctor situation. I think doctors, especially in traditional Western medicine, serve a purpose, and I think seeing a doctor for diagnoses is important. I think that kind of gets you going in the right direction and knowing what you're dealing with.
Hmm.
And then, um, if you take their prognosis and you see that it's something that you don't want to deal with long term, then start doing your research. And I think, like you said, it's important then to find these alternative methods, like the Dr. Sean Baker's with Rivero Health and Dr. Anthony Chafee. I know he has a functional medicine practice on the side as well, working with people like this that have seen success without prescription drugs. I know my wife and I have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars to try to figure out what was going to put this thing away. And if I would have known at the time that it was going to be food and food alone, we, financially wouldn't have had to spend that much money. But first and foremost, I would say if someone came to me as a client, a potential client that was on a consultation call with myself, I would say that first and foremost, we need to address any underlying symptoms that they might have, whether that's joint pain or digestive problems, whatever that mental acuity things, like just if you're having problems focusing at work or whatever that might be. I would say health is going to be the first and foremost before we start addressing the physical side of things. Just health from an overall standpoint. Once we get those things in order, then we can start to address the physical, how people look and their physique, stuff like that, if they want to improve their physique. But first and foremost, we're going to address the other things, because unless those are in line, then we're not going to have the best results in the weight room. So one thing I can point out for myself, when I finally was able to heal my gastro stuff and started to feel better from that, I didn't realize how many other things I was dealing with that I guess my mind was putting them on the back burner because I was dealing with this one thing that was so tough to deal with at the time. And once that was put to rest, I noticed my joints don't hurt anymore. So I used to always have knee problems when I squatted. I'd have to take several days off from the gym afterwards because, it was just so painful. I remember at one point I got tendonitis in my knee so bad that I couldn't squat without crashing, which is essentially where you get to the bottom of the squat and then your legs just give out and the bar crashes on the safety bars. So I couldn't complete a full squat without immense pain. Always had low back pain. And now that I've been able to heal my stomach, I've noticed that back pain is no longer. I mean, I do get some back tightness, but that's also because I'm staring at a computer all the time and I need to start implementing my stand up desk. So I will tell you right now, sitting all day will cause back problems regardless. But as far as the knee pain and the joint pain, I don't have any knee pain whatsoever. I can squat full range of motion, no problem. And I talk about the importance of this because if you can exercise in a pain-free manner, there's several different things that are going to reap benefits from that. Not only are you going to be training with weight in a full range of motion that recruits more muscle fibers, you're also going to be more willing to want to go back to the gym. Your body's not going to hurt. Like you're not going to wake up the next morning and not be able to walk, or your back hurts so bad that you don't feel like you can train the next session. So putting all those things to rest is the most important thing to get started on a program that you're going to be able to do long term. And that's really what I want to promote to people, is that your health overall is first and foremost the most important. And then once we get that under control, we can start to implement a proper strength training plan. And it's amazing how fast your body responds when it's in a place where it's receptive to that type of resistance. I've noticed just with myself, I had to take around a 6+ month hiatus from the gym because I started to associate the gym with being sick. And so, I was at the gym, which is a place I love, and I was having to run to the bathroom and then try to do a set and then run to the bathroom again. And it left a really bad taste in my mouth. So I was out of the gym for quite some time. I went from being 205 pounds to under 180 pounds. So I lost 25 pounds during that time. Some of which was muscle, I know. And so now now that I'm healthy again, I'm working to regain that muscle. And I'm roughly 2 weeks into this now. I've been in the gym a little longer than 2 weeks, but I've got my program nailed down now, and I'm just over 2 weeks into that. taking my progress pictures and my scale measurements and all that stuff, and I'm up 2 pounds already in 2 weeks. So comparing my images, I take posing images every week for my bodybuilding stuff, and looking at the images, I'm liking what I'm seeing, so I'm going to continue on this route and continue to push. And so,
Great.
yeah.
That's so awesome. Good for you. 2 weeks is not long. So what happened 2 weeks ago?
Well, like I said, I was back in the gym, but I wanted to start slow. My body's been dealing with the ulcerative colitis stuff for 5 years, and I know healing is not an overnight process. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to jump into things too heavy, too quick, and tax my body to a point where it's going to slow recovery. And so I did that for a few months and slowly worked my way back into the gym to not overwhelm my body. And now I'm back to an 8 day rotational split, which is for every 8 days. I've got 2 days scheduled in there for complete rest days, no working out. I might do something like a walk outside or something to get some type of movement, but it's nothing intense. So I'm really monitoring my body, and if I have a day where intuitively I feel pretty beat up, I will take an extra planned rest day just to listen to my body in that aspect. But the 2 week mark there is really just me putting back in the structure that you need to be at a very high level and to compete at a high level. And so that's really all that is. I've been in the gym longer than 2 weeks, but for the past 2 weeks, my meal plans have been very structured. My sleep is structured. My weight room routine is structured. Any type of cardio structured. So everything has a plan and a purpose behind it now. Like I said, some things are intuitive still as far as rest goes, but everything else is very planned and calculated.
Great. I love how you said that when your doctor told you about your diagnosis, you got a like a sick feeling in your gut. Like your gut was still aware and intuitive enough to give you the message that, maybe that's not the route you want to go. That's not going to work for you personally. And I do think that there is a place for sure for Western medicine, absolutely, with so many things. And there's also limitations. And when we sense that there is a limitation that we're experiencing, and we listen to our body and we tune into that messaging, it's really important to know that that's exactly what you need to know about what you're hearing to be able to have the interest and the motivation and the inspiration to really seek some outside alternatives. Something that I talk a lot about is tuning in and listening to our bodies, and especially as you begin to actually heal and see changes, that our guidance system lies within us. And the more we can tune into that, like you said, you were doing meditation and all sorts of other things too, but not to necessarily identify with a diagnosis either, because if you did that, if you accepted that as your reality, you wouldn't be here doing what you're doing today. You'd probably still not be feeling so well. So thanks for sharing that piece about how you felt when your doctor explained that to you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I tell people too, like, it's so difficult to reach out to some people who are struggling with things like what I struggled with, or even just autoimmune in general, because there's not enough stories out there yet. And that's why I'm so happy to come on here with like-minded people and to collaborate with people like yourself, because there's not enough stories out there. And I tell people, sharing our testimonies and our healing journey is the only thing that's going to convince other people to give it a try. And and I see so many people, like you said, that start to find their identity in their disease, and it just makes for a long life, and not in a great aspect. It's a long, painful life, and a life that makes you ask why, and a lot of different things. And I think, like, I'll say, I don't know if carnivore is for everybody long term, but I will say from a healing aspect, I've seen a lot of good success with autoimmune stuff. So um, arthritis, ulcerative colitis, all these different things that people have had great success with. And like I said, maybe once you're healed, we can implement some foods and test the waters with some different types of foods, but it has to be a slow process, and it needs to be one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was implementing certain foods and I was not having success, I had a very hard time implementing one at a time. So I would eat, 5 or 6 different foods in a day, and then have problems and wonder, well, I wonder if it was the rice, or I wonder if it was the fruit, or I wonder if it was the honey, all these different things. And until I cut everything out and went on the carnivore diet was when I finally was able to reach success. And for now, I'm completely content eating what I'm eating. I don't feel really the urge for anything. And for the people who have had success on other diets like the SCD diet or the specific carbohydrate diet, I think maybe those people are better at moderation than I am. I'm a very driven person, but I also have tendencies to want to overdo things. And so when I was told that I could have peanut butter and honey and fruit on this SCD diet, I took it too far. And so I was making these peanut butter cookies that were a cup of peanut butter and like a cup of honey, and then I would eat like the whole batch in less than 2 days. And so my fructose and sugar levels were through the roof, I'm sure, on top of eating bananas and apples and blueberries and all these different things. And like I said, in moderation, it might be okay. But for someone like myself that has a very, I'll say I've got sticky fingers for carbs, is what I'll say.
Mhm.
I would overdo them all the time. And I think that's what gave me a little success at the beginning was being very, very moderate with how much I was using. I was being so careful in the beginning. I was just basically eating bone broth and meat, and any types of fruit I was having were minimal and they were cooked. So at the beginning, that's when I had that success. But as I started to implement more of these foods in larger quantities, I started to see myself digress in my success. So that was where I think I had a problem was the moderation. And I see with this diet, I can, eat what I want to eat, which is my choices of the meats and the fats, and I can eat as much of it as I want. And if I do tend to overindulge a little bit, I don't really have to worry about dipping back into an autoimmune flare. You might get some digestive inconveniences, I'd say. You could get some diarrhea or a little bit of gas or if you overconsume on protein in a particular sitting, stuff like that. But really, it's pretty safe. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of definitions for carnivore. Some carnivores think that honey and fruit is fine. Other people do not advocate for that, and I think it's an individual journey. And I do advocate for cutting everything out at the beginning. That's just wiping the slate clean, you could say. And I come from a background where I've been trained with Dr. Natasha Campbell, who wrote the book the GAPS diet, gut and psychology syndrome. Is her main focus was helping autistic children and helping people overcome mental illness by healing their gut. Because when your gut is leaky or inflamed, you could say, from these toxic plants that we're all told to eat so much of, these tiny food and undigested food particles, it get into the bloodstream. They seep out through the digestive tract into the bloodstream. And that is what's triggering autoimmunity, because these toxins get collected and gathered up and their body's trying to get rid of them. And ultimately, if they collect in our fatty tissues, because toxins love fat, they're lipophilic, you could say. So they attract to our organs and our nerves and our joints. And then ultimately the body then turns against itself to try to get rid of these accumulated toxins. And that's when we have severe autoimmune reactions such as Hashimoto's and all these other autoimmune diagnoses that are indicative that the body's really just doing its job. It's trying to clean the house. It's trying to get rid of these toxins that have accumulated in our organs and our lymph system. Because that's the filtration systems of our body. So those organs often get hit the hardest, or our joints as well, where we have these cartilage and the fatty tissue to protect the joints. And oftentimes that's where oxalates love to hang out. And particularly, you mentioned making peanut butter cookies, which I think is so ironic because peanuts are probably the highest in oxalates of all plants
mhm.
anywhere. Why would that even be on somebody's list of acceptable foods, if they have an ulcerative
Yeah.
colitis situation? That's where some of these diets can be really helpful for short term, but eventually it catches up. And so I'm a huge fan of just wiping the slate clean, starting with only non-inflammatory foods, which leaves animal products, right? Animal fats, animal protein. And then, like you said, once in a while, or when you feel like you're completely healed and you've reached your goal weight and your body is fully functional, then it's time to potentially add in new foods. But again, one at a time is so, so important. And so that's one of the things that I go through with all my clients is, those things you add in first are the least inflammatory plant foods, of course. Just kind of go from there. But some people will never be able to eat anything but a strict carnivore diet. And I'm hoping I'm not one of them, but I'm in my own journey. It's been about 2 years for me, so I'm still experimenting with it myself, and it's obviously one of the approaches to a keto diet, which is mainly what I help people do, is to get keto adapted. So, do you check your ketones and your blood sugar on a regular basis?
So I did test my blood sugars when I first transitioned. I haven't checked them as frequently now. One thing I have adjusted, um, and you'll probably find this more so in the fitness community, I would say, people who are physique driven, we do use macronutrients, like macronutrient profiles, more consistently than say just someone who's strict carnivore that says, hey, what I need is in meat, that's all I need. So, and I agree with that to an extent, but I think for myself, when I first started, I was some of my blood glucose readings were over 100, 120, and that was early. That was early on, and I think my body was still in transition phase from a glucose burning state to a fat burning state. And so, as of recently, the most recent one I took was around 80, and so I think it's trending in the right direction. I did adjust my macronutrient profile. I had to start with a higher protein ratio because my body was not used to consuming that many fats, and I was having gastro and just I was having diarrhea and stuff like that. So to combat that, I did start a little higher protein, more like a 65-35 ratio. And as that went on, I began to increase my fats a little bit here and there, and I would begin to draw back on my proteins. And so now my proteins, I'm continuing to pull them lower and lower, and I would like to eventually get them down to around a gram a pound and then have my fats be extremely high. And I'm doing that at a slow process because I want my body to kind of adjust as it goes. But yeah, originally to start, I was consuming like over 300 grams of protein, and I didn't feel the greatest. My bowel movements were good, but at the same time, my energy levels, I wasn't quite reaping the benefits of that consistent energy line that people are always talking about with the keto approach. And so I started to slowly pull my proteins down and adjust my fats. And now I'm starting to feel that constant energy source. I'm starting to feel like if I get, I certainly promote getting your sleep, but if I don't get the amount of sleep that I anticipate for, I don't feel like I'm dragging throughout the day. So energy levels are certainly increasing now. And if I had to guess, I need to get a new Lancer for my blood glucose. But if I had to guess, my blood glucose numbers are trending down because I do not have any swings in energy throughout the day. Mental clarity is certainly there. And so I am going to be interested in testing some ketones shortly, but I'm probably going to go with the blood tester with that as well too. I'm just looking into some different devices that are seeming to be the most accurate, as I've seen some are highly fluctuating with what they read out and stuff like that. And I've also seen they're coming out with some technology, and I think it's already out where they can test ketones through the breath. And if I had to guess if I was in ketosis or not, I would say yes, because my wife has noticed a certain smell with my breath, and it's not like bad breath. It's just she calls it like a sweet smell almost. And I was doing some research the other day and noticed that typically means high ketones in your bloodstream. So although I do not consistently track them on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, there are certainly other things that have suggested that yes, I'm in ketosis. And like I said, the energy is certainly the biggest thing. I've noticed my energy in the gym has gone up significantly in the past week. I've been able to lift more weight and not tire out as quick in the weight room. And so I think I'm trending in the right direction at this point. I guess, ketosis, I can finally start to feel what it feels like. And I think from a physiological standpoint, people can find that difference even without testing certain things. So.
Great. Yeah, there is a lot of new technology coming out, so that's exciting. I still use the old fashioned way, pricking my finger, but yeah, the Precision Extra, I find it to be really reliable. Precision Extra is a ketone monitor and blood sugar monitor that is in one gadget. And so you only have to prick your finger once and you can just push out enough drops to get 2 drops. And then there's 2 different strips. One tests your ketones, one tests your blood sugar. And it's been a great tool for myself and my clients. So it's one to check out. I'm sure there's a lot of new technology that's probably coming out that's better, but that's historically been a very good tool that I've recommended to many people.
Yeah, I've seen the most inaccurate ones seem to be the urine test strips. They measure excess ketones in the urine, and so people will use one of these test strips and they'll get a high reading back, and they're like, "Oh man, great, I'm in ketosis," but really that's just your body excreting extra ketones in which they're not utilizing in an efficient manner. And so really that could just mean that you're not in ketosis and that your body's just excreting all these ketones. So one thing I did forget to mention this, and I'm sorry, I didn't put this in my bio. When I went to my naturopathic doctor, I just wanted to bring this up for people who are struggling with autoimmune stuff. One autoimmune can oftentimes lead to another. And so, although my symptoms came out in the form of ulcerative colitis when I got my blood work back from my naturopathic doctor, my thyroid peroxidase antibodies were well above their limits. And so I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's by her. And so her thoughts behind that were the Hashimoto's is typically um, a long occurring process. And so she thinks it dates back 5 to 7 years that this stuff could have started back, which was right around the time I had my surgery.
Mm.
And so that's why when we mentioned before about the antibiotics and all these different things, what could have truly kick-started it, I don't know if I'll ever be able to pinpoint it, but hindsight is definitely 2020 with some of this stuff. A normal range for the TPA is under 9 IUs per milliliter. Mine was 111. And so it was significantly over where it should have been. And like I said, looking back, if she dates it, and she didn't know, really any history as far as my surgery and stuff went. And so 5 to 7 years put it right around that time of when I was going through all that stuff. And yeah, and so I think that that was probably what contributed it, or what contributed to some of it. But then again, I was also having, UC stuff at that time too. So do I attribute everything to that? I'm not sure, but it certainly played a part in that, because if that's when the Hashimoto's could have started, that's around the time the UC started too. And so that was really when my body started to really go against itself.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense that you would have a thyroid issue. It's so, so common with autoimmunity to have the thyroid affected. I have a question for you. Do you take iodine?
Yes. So since starting the carnivore diet, that was another thing. And I know Dr. Ken Berry is another great resource.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he's specifically carnivore, certainly keto, but he's got a lot of great information on there about the carnivore diet as well, and iodine and all that good stuff for resources for people. You can overdo it on iodine, but yeah, he's got some great videos and lessons on there for people who want to look into that. But I do just a couple drops of the Lugol's iodine every
Great.
morning, and it's their smallest percentage concentrate. So it's
Uh-huh.
putting me right around 5 grams or 5 milligrams or something like that every day. So
Great. And that's still really low. I mean, there's a book called The Salt Fix. There's so many books written about the need for salt and iodine. Obviously, when you do carnivore, you need a lot more salt in your diet. When you're keto, you need a lot more salt because your body gets very efficient at flushing kidneys. And so we have to replenish, and salt is super crucial when you're doing a low carb or keto diet or a carnivore diet.
mhm.
Really important. And iodine is crucial for the thyroid function and for all the glands and for all the humans out there that are either afraid of it or have been told not to have it if they have anything going on with their thyroid. Um, I highly recommend a book called The Salt Fix. And there's so many doctors, like you said, talking about this. And there's so, so much research about the importance of iodine in the human diet. And especially when it has to do with IQ of, babies and the possible IQ of adults. The research that's been done on the IQ of children who have iodine when their moms were pregnant and kids that didn't, and the rates of ADHD and autism are just through the roof right now. And they're noticing that that has a lot to do with whether or not the mother had iodine in her diet as a supplement. So we do need this in our body. All of you out there listening, super important. You're not going to hear this probably from your doctor. Maybe if you go to a naturopath, they might mention iodine. Most of them do not. And in fact, most people with Hashimoto's or thyroid issues are told do not take iodine because it's worse. It makes your thyroid issues worse. So there's just so much research on this that proves otherwise, that I really want to open anybody up to the idea, at least, that taking iodine may very well benefit their thyroid issues and all sorts of other things. But let's just start with the thyroid because it's the most well-known organ that requires a lot more iodine than any other organ. And especially for women, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but the ovaries, the uterus, women require about twice as much iodine as men, even up to 12 micrograms. You said you were taking 3
Yeah, I think I'm taking 2 drops right now, and I want to say it comes out to about 5 micrograms.
micrograms. Yeah. So
Mhm.
12 micrograms for men and even up to 23 micrograms, or double the amount for women, because the ovaries, the uterus, and the sex hormones require iodine to be manufactured in the body. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. So all of
No,
you out there
that's
that are maybe struggling with hormone imbalances, especially, perimenopausal women, huge improvements when iodine is added to the diet that I've seen and noticed in myself and other clients. So
yeah.
thanks for
I think
bringing that up.
that's absolutely. I think that's super interesting that you mentioned, um, 12 micrograms too, because one of the things that Ken Berry did discuss was Asian populations and their diets and how they're taking up to 50 micrograms. And if it was really a problem for the human body to assimilate that type of dosage, that these people would be dying, right? I mean, there would be early mortality in these people, and we're not seeing that. And so I think I totally agree with you. I probably could up mine a little bit, especially having a history of the thyroiditis stuff. 12 micrograms is very reasonable now that I think back to his discussion that they were consuming up to 50 micrograms a day and not having any adverse effects. So and to touch on the electrolytes as well, like you were talking with sodium or salt and potassium as well. When I first transitioned for the first couple weeks, I did have problems with electrolytes. I was having hand cramps. I was getting headaches during the day, and I didn't really know where to start. So I was kind of just salting my food to taste, but I think it was a potassium ratio issue for me. And because I supplement with a little bit of magnesium, but not, hardly any. But for me, it was a sodium and potassium problem. And so I did start tracking mine just until I get a handle on what makes me feel good versus what's maybe a little too much versus what's not enough. And so right now I'm just over 4,000 um, milligrams on the sodium. And then for the potassium, I usually try to keep that around 50%. So around 2,000, 2,100 milligrams on that. And I've been feeling pretty good. My energy, like I said, in the gym has been better. And it's helped with, I think, I haven't had any headaches since I've increased the supplementation of that. And I think I could even go a little bit higher on the sodium still yet because I do work so hard in the gym. And, it's one of the hottest parts of the year right now in Georgia. So when I'm outside doing yard work, I sweat a lot. And so replenishing those electrolytes, I totally agree, is vital to having success on this diet, because if you don't, you're going to get a lot of that keto flu stuff that people talk about. You're going to have the headaches. You're going to have, low energy, and your legs are probably going to feel like they weigh 100 pounds. So it's important, I think, to start, especially until your body assimilates to this lifestyle, to supplement with some type of electrolyte.
Yeah, salting your food is not enough. Not enough salt.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot too, in some groups and stuff like you said that we're a part of, people promoting pulling salt and stuff like that, and not supplementing potassium and these different things. And for my personal recommendations, and this is my opinion, and you can certainly let me know what you think about this too. People are telling people not to supplement with potassium, not to supplement with sodium. And from my own experience and kind of the research I've done on my own, potassium can be leaked and leached by your body from anything from tissue to bones if it needs to. It can pull it from your bones if it has to. And so I just feel like it's a very poor recommendation for people to not utilize a salt or a potassium supplement. What do you kind of think on that topic? That's one thing I did want to ask you today.
It's a really good question. I think it really depends on people's level of activity. And if you're talking to an obese person that has 100 pounds to lose and they're not moving their body very much, I don't think it's really that big of an issue. I do think that salt has to be supplemented in the form of salt water. So I'm a big proponent of drinking salt water every day, at least, a teaspoon in the morning. And because you need sodium. And so if you're drinking just salt, let's say Redmond salt or a whole Himalayan sea salt, or hopefully a clean salt that's not really coming from the ocean, because a lot of the salts from the ocean now have a lot of plastics in them. So something that's a mined salt, like a salt that comes from Utah or someplace like that in the US, would be a cleaner salt that's not exposed to the plastic element. Salt is crucial no matter where you are on your journey, but then the supplementing with the other electrolytes, the potassium, the magnesium, and things like that, I think very much depend on your activity level. So if you're sweating every day and you're lifting weights and you're training for a Ironman or something, you're definitely going to be excreting a lot more of those electrolytes, and they have to be replenished. Because we've all sort of been brainwashed to believe that we should be eating different foods that actually have a lot of anti-nutrients that are leaching minerals and electrolytes out of our body, such as the oxalates and the phytates and the tannins that bind to nutrients. They actually excrete key nutrients like calcium out of your bones. I would say, most people are probably very deficient, and they're very, what I see working with naturopathic doctors and doing a lot of labs and macronutrient, micronutrient panels on people, is that most people, I would say, like almost 100% of everybody who walks into the clinic that I see is deficient in nutrients and minerals, and electrolytes. So that could be one way to really know what's going on. But if you didn't know, I think there's no harm that can be done in taking a mineral supplement or a electrolyte supplement if it doesn't upset your gut, right? So a lot of people do powders or pills, and people with ulcerative colitis or IBD, they can't digest these capsules, And so if your body can handle it, starting slow would probably be a good start. But I just want to reiterate that the more you're sweating, the more you're moving, the more you're going to need. Testing isn't always an option. But the good thing is that you will never have a negative side effect from having too much salt. You'll just get more thirsty and you'll drink more water. So it's very much a self-regulated process. What isn't so self-regulated is when we drink a lot of water. And I see this happen a lot. So we're all taught, that we need to hydrate. We need to drink more and more and more water. But you can get really, really dehydrated just drinking water without salt added to it. So I'm a big fan of drinking a glass of salt water every morning, at least 7 grams of salt or sodium. So that may mean more, a teaspoon, maybe even to 2 teaspoons of salt, whole salt every day. So that means at least a teaspoon in my water. I drink that down first thing in the morning, every morning. And then I also salt my food, and I salt my food a lot. So I'm not afraid of salt. I don't think anybody should be afraid of salt. We've all been sort of taught to be afraid of salt, but it's good for us. We need it. It's an essential element in the body. And if we don't have it, we're going to see all kinds of breakdown. So the salt and these electrolytes really activate the nervous system, the nerves, the transmission, all of the activities and the enzymes and the things that go on in the body require salt, and we cannot live without it, and we cannot produce it. So it's so incredibly important that we find a good source of salt that's clean, and we add it to our food, and maybe even drink salt water every morning if we're going to that extent. But if you're on a low carb, keto, or carnivore diet, you definitely should look into drinking salt water every morning, because that's one way to at least make sure you get half as much as you need, and then still salt your food, and maybe even still have more salt water in the evening, with the addition of potentially magnesium and potassium as well. So that's my download. I don't know if that helps you at
Yeah.
all.
No, that's great. Thank you for putting it into perspective, though, because from my mindset, like I said, I'm very um, gym based and personal training based. So my thoughts always come from a performance perspective. And I think you're totally right with somebody who's more of just a weight loss candidate versus somebody who's looking for high performance are two different approaches. And I think that was a great way of putting it, because somebody who's looking to peak performance certainly is going to need a different electrolyte profile than somebody who, for instance, is just losing weight through diet alone. So yeah, I think that's great. And I actually have my salt water sitting right here. So I totally am on the same page as you with that. I try to get a high dosage of mine first thing in the morning. And I think that's important, because if we're tracking our sodium intake, it is important to get a vast majority of it in the morning, because you're going to be using that sodium for your daily function. So if you're waiting until nighttime to get it and utilize it, that's probably a good majority of your day that has been, utilized, that hasn't been getting what it needs. And so getting it first thing in the morning, I think, is a great approach to, have a successful day, and to be able to avoid certain aspects, whether that be cramping or, whatever it may be. But I totally am on the same page with you as that.
Great. I know you've done a lot of research, so I'm open to whatever insights you're sharing with me as well. I'm in this to learn and grow and help as many people as I can as well. So I love hearing what you're doing. So you said you don't. I'm gonna wrap this up, but I want to ask you one more question. You said you don't track your macros necessarily, but maybe you're starting to. And what? So you gave some percentages. I just want to reiterate a little bit for people that if you're in a weight loss mode, you're not going to be eating as much dietary fat as somebody who doesn't want to lose weight and wants to protect their lean muscle mass, like you and myself and anybody else who's training or optimizing in that way. I'm a big proponent of macro tracking myself. And I do believe it's really, really important for people to understand, because if you're consuming excess dietary fat, you're not going to be burning as much of your own body fat. Okay. And so when you reach your goal weight, your macros really need to change. And I do see that a lot in the carnivore community, people saying, I'm doing carnivore, but I'm not losing weight. It's been 2 or 3 months. To me, that would be unheard of. Like if you're doing carnivore the right way and you're trying to lose weight and you're not tracking your macros, you're really just kind of shooting in the dark and you're guessing, and you're probably going to waste a lot of time because your body's just not getting to the fat that's on your body for its fuel source is all that's happening with that. And so that's when you need to change your macros. Once you meet your goal weight or reach your goal weight, it's time to increase that fat intake. And you can increase your protein intake too, probably at that point, because you're going to be doing some more activity. Hopefully, once you get the fat off, you want to build muscle. That's the goal. So we'll talk again about muscle building maybe on the next podcast, Travis, but that's kind of where I like to see what's possible after we get this excess body fat off and where can we go from there? Because then, it's all about putting on muscle. And so I'm a big fan of that. And I'm working on that myself and learning from lots of people that do that as a profession, but I am kind of new at this. So yeah, I'm just in my mid 50s now, and it's like, okay, it's time to protect my bones and my muscle mass, because that's really so important as we age.
No, I think that's great that that's what you're focusing on. Muscle is the indicator of longevity, and so a lot of times what you see in as people age and get older, one of the number one issues that people have, if they have a fall, for instance, and someone breaks a hip, that can lead to death. And the reason behind that, it's not because their body couldn't withstand the fall, it's that there wasn't any muscle to protect that bone from breaking and causing death eventually. So muscle is the indicator of longevity. I think building a muscle base and maintaining that through old age is highly important, probably one of the most important things you could do next to your diet. And from a macronutrient standpoint, I went the vast majority throughout my sickness tracking my macros. I was a freak about it. I did it for the purpose of bodybuilding and physique competition. And so I still am an advocate for it. In the beginning of this diet, I didn't focus too much on it because all I cared about was getting better. I didn't care about really what I looked like. I said, as long as I'm not bleeding when I use the bathroom, I really don't care at this point. I just want to heal. And so from a life balance standpoint, I just ate what I wanted, I just would eat what I wanted to eat and ate till I was full, like everybody recommended. And I did notice that I wasn't really putting on any weight, and I certainly didn't want to lose weight because I was already pretty lean. I think at the time I was around like 174 to 176 pounds. And for somebody who used to weigh 200, that's pretty light. And so I didn't track initially until I started to realize I wasn't really gaining any muscle tissue or adding any additional weight. And so I did begin to track again. And that's when I started to realize that I started to figure out what my protein ratio was to my fat ratio, and started to realize I was around that 65-35. And although digestion was good, energy wasn't optimal. So I started to implement kind of what's called finding your protein threshold. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Robert Sykes, who's the Keto Savage. He's a great resource for anybody out there looking to build muscle, lose fat, macronutrient help. I know he's got a macro calculator on his website. There are some things that you've got to do some legwork on your end to figure out what those are. But for anybody who's lost or needs a tool, that is a good starting point. Now, everybody is going to be a little different in regards to how that macronutrient profile needs to be adjusted in terms to get the results that they would like to get. But for myself, I had to start bringing down that protein because I think my body through gluconeogenesis was converting some of that to a glucose fuel source, and it was very fleeting.
Mm.
So I would be in the gym and I'd have a great first set, and then I'd go into like my second and third sets, and I would fizzle out in a very fast manner. And so I started to realize, okay, whatever my body's doing right now is not efficient to fuel me through these workouts. And so that's when I started to play with my fat to protein ratio again, and notice when I started to reduce my protein and increase my fat, keeping the same caloric amount, I started to feel better in regards to energy levels. But I said that's a slow process. Somebody might not be ready to jump 20 grams in fat overnight, and that might cause uh, distress in the gut. They might get diarrhea or whatever it may be, because the bile isn't really keeping up with that amount of fat. Just such a significant jump overnight. And so I started doing it increments at a time. So I just did little by little each day. I would adjust it maybe 5 grams less of protein and add 2 grams of fat. It's a pretty close ratio in regards to calories. And so now I'm closer to more just under 75% from fat, and around 25% for protein, which has been a pretty good ratio for me so far. And I am going to continue to bring that protein level down some. I think, like I said, Robert's got some great information out there in regards to contest prep, which is the process in which somebody gets ready for a bodybuilding show. And the recommended grams for protein to withhold muscle mass is probably not as high as some people think it is. And so being 175 pounds, if let's say, for example, somebody were 175 pounds, they might not need 1 gram per pound of body weight to withstand that, muscle. And so I think the general recommendations are anywhere from zero point 0.8 to 1 pound per gram of lean body mass. And so if somebody were to calculate their lean body mass, they would, subtract the fat tissue. After it's calculated, you come up with what's left, which is essentially just your skeletal muscle. And let's say that's 140 grams. They've got 30 grams of fat, whether that's body fat or visceral fat around their organs. And they can adjust that protein down to say 140 grams. And so some people might be like, that's a pretty low number for protein, at least from a athletic standpoint or bodybuilding standpoint. People would suggest that's pretty low. But Robert has actually put some stuff out there that shows that you can, diet on a much lower amount of protein than what you think you might be able to. And of course, there is a minimum, that you recommend for bodily function and just overall cell turnover and stuff. But it's not as high as we once thought it was. And that's one thing that I am experimenting with right now. I think fat is a great fuel source, and it's a consistent fuel source. And so if you can keep your protein a little bit on the lower end of the spectrum, it's probably okay, as long as you can tolerate the fat. And that's really what I'm playing with right now. And so if somebody were to reach their ideal weight and they wanted to start implementing some additional muscle gains, it doesn't necessarily have to come from a protein standpoint. Another thing he talks about is that ketones are actually very muscle sparing. And so there are a lot of power in ketones too. So if we can add additional fats and utilize those ketones in a proper manner, that's probably going to help with muscle retention as well. So protein is important, and it plays a vital role in muscle protein synthesis. But from a fueling standpoint, I think that we have to be cognitive of how much protein we are putting in, because I do think there is a tipping point for people to start tipping into that glucose versus fat fuel type. And so that's where he kind of coined the term, you could say, in this industry, that protein threshold, because there is a point of diminishing returns when it comes to increasing your protein. So I think it's important to focus on your biofeedback in that aspect.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So there is people that wear continuous glucose monitors, and you can get super anal retentive about all of these numbers and the gadgets and the tracking, and that's kind of next level. But the point that you're bringing up is just one to consider. And I just want to really quickly reiterate that for people that might not understand what you're saying, is that when you have fat that you're on your body, your body's always going to burn that fat before it begins to break down muscle. Okay. So the fat is protecting your muscles. So you don't have to worry about losing muscle mass necessarily if you're on a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Now, if your protein is excessive to your body, which is unique to everybody, everybody has their own unique carbohydrate and also protein threshold that needs to be discovered. And the only way to do this is to really start to track and say, okay, I ate this and I got this result and my blood sugar was this. And at some point, if you have excess protein for your body is going to break that down into glucose. For some people, it can actually reduce their performance because you switch from burning fat to burning glucose in the middle of maybe a marathon or a workout or whatever it is. And that can lead to severe energy loss or bonking or whatever you want to call it in the athletic world. These are really finer details of where we're going. And for the most part, you can start out so simple. Just start eating animal products, just start eating steak and maybe with some, the visible fat, eating that. And then at some point down the way, you're going to experience enough of a change that you're going to probably have questions and you're going to want to fine tune things. And that's kind of where we're going with this discussion about the details around the fat and protein ratios. But that's not necessary at the beginning, I would say necessarily. I think it's a great practice, and I teach all of my clients how to track, and that they should know and they should track, because it's just vital information that you want to know from your body, right? This is how we communicate with our body and learn its language. And that's really such an important part of what I want people to walk away from when they work with me, is that they learn this language and they can interpret what their body's messages are, and they can deliver the messages to their body that they want to, so that they get the results that they want, because if you're telling your body to gain weight, but you want to lose weight, you're never going to get the results you want, right? So we really have to learn this language of our metabolism. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So I just wanted to reiterate that a little bit for people that might not know. But,
Yeah. I think there's levels to everything, and there's levels to your business. There's levels to health, all these different things. And I tell people all the time, I don't want you to be my client for life. I want to give you the tools that you need to be able to manage this stuff on your own. And I think you're right. Anybody who's looking to heal, if you're overwhelmed and don't want to track macros, don't. The extra stress that it's going to cause you, it's probably not worth it. I totally agree that you can heal without tracking them, but the next level is totally tracking your ratios or tracking your calories and just seeing where those are coming from and how you feel, because that's going to be the only way that you understand how your body really works. So
absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that. I think it's really important. Well, thank you so much, Travis. I'm just so delighted to hear all of these really interesting and informative things that you have shared today. And I want to honor your time. So thank you so much for joining me. And is there anything that you might want to leave people with? If it's like your one last parting words of advice or a tip or anything that you might want to just leave people with before we end this conversation?
I think, kind of how I end all of my interviews with other people, I just want to encourage anybody that's out there that might be sick or struggling with something like what I've struggled with, or any digestive problem or autoimmune issue. If you get a prognosis or diagnosis that you don't agree with or that does not sit well with you, just reach out to somebody. Look online. There's so many people and resources out there now, that the internet is a wonderful place for that. And the internet is a tool to help you find answers to those things. And if you don't have the time or the resources to do that kind of stuff, reach out to somebody like myself, and or yourself. You've got great resources too. And so reach out to anybody that's been through this kind of stuff, or that can help you, and we'll point you in the right direction, at least on where to start. So I don't want anybody to be out there to feel like they don't have answers to their problem, because they are out there, and most doctors, like you said, will tell you that there's no solution. So, but there is. It's a process.
It is. Do you have a podcast?
I just have a YouTube channel for now.
Okay.
I'm just doing Carnivore Success Series, and so I'm interviewing different people that I've had, people who've struggled with like cystic acne or mental issues that they've struggled with in the past. Just a lot of different stuff. Food addiction is another one that, carb addiction specifically is another one that's been on there. And that's what's been so fun about this whole process, is like, there are so many different types of ailments and struggle that people have had success with in this diet. And, like I said, I don't know if it's long-term for everybody, but I think it can certainly help a lot of people. So,
well, maybe just share with us where people can find you. Your YouTube channel, any of your social media handles where people can find the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so Instagram is the Real Method Fitness. You'll find a lot of my workouts and stuff on there. I try to share tips and stuff on there. If I've got any upcoming stuff coming up, YouTube is the Real Method Fitness as well on YouTube, and I also have a Facebook, and that one is Travis Moore Fitness. And Instagram and Facebook are kind of synonymous with each other, so it's a lot of the same information. So whatever is your preferred platform, it's pretty much the same information on those two. But
Great. Okay, and I'll put all those links in the show notes for everybody. So go look up Travis and see what he's up to. All right, awesome. Thanks, Travis. You have a great day, and we'll be in touch, okay?
thanks so much, Mary.
Okay, take it easy.
All
Have a
right,
great day.
you too. Bye bye.
You can find me at ketogenicdietcoach.com, where you can find out more about my program called Radical Health Makeover. This will help you get keto adapted so you can live your life more fully. This is a 1-year mastery course that includes private coaching sessions with me that you can actually start today. You are not a victim of your genetic code. If you're looking to reverse symptoms of leaky gut, chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmunity, cancer, or if you just want to maximize your athletic performance or age more gracefully, training your metabolism to burn fat for fuel instead of just carbohydrates is a powerful strategy. I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, Radical Health Makeover: The Science and Spirituality of Self-Healing, which will give you a solid foundation for taking control of your health. In it, I've outlined specific strategies that you must take with your diet, as well as important daily practices that will help you to leverage the power of your mind in your healing process. You'll also find my free ebook that you can download called How to Start a Keto Diet the Right Way: The 3 Must-Do Steps for Success, along with my free 5-day keto challenge that will teach you everything you need to know about tracking your progress. This is crucial for being successful with a keto diet. You have to learn how to track your biometrics and so that you can learn the language of your body. I know this sounds daunting, but I will walk you through this whole process and I will simplify it for you and help you to avoid the common pitfalls and problems that I see so often that people are making that's really derailing them from having success. I don't want that to happen to you. So do reach out to me on my website. You can send me a message and let me know how I can support you on your keto journey.